Did you know that right now there are 26 maps in Overwatch? It's true, right now there are 26 maps in the game, and if you count the variations and additions for seasonal events, that number goes to about 42. The maps in Overwatch are one of the defining features of the gameplay, obviously, and each new map introduced changes the way we play. Every time we've seen something brand new based on really cool themes from around the world. Although our selection of maps has expanded to be really big since launch, did you know that the old concepts for maps were actually really different than the ones we know today? If Blizzard decided to go these map designs I'll be showing you today, I promise you we'd have a very different version of Overwatch. One more fantasy based and a lot less based in the futuristic techie world we see today. Hi, I'm Quarbit, and these are the lost maps of Overwatch. Map ideas and concepts that were pitched before Overwatch's preliminary development. There are 11 maps that we know of and have concept art of that Blizzard pitched during their pre-development that we never saw make their way into the game. Some of them we've seen turned into other maps that you'll definitely note the similarities with, but others simply weren't given their time in the spotlight and with a few adjustments could probably find their way into the game somewhere in the future. Kicking off, we have our first concept simply known as the Amazon. Unfortunately, these are the best resolution pictures I can find of these map concepts, so I apologize but try to bear with me. From the concept art, all we can tell is that it was a map based either around or inside the temple that's depicted. Now, we've seen temple and shrine maps in Overwatch before, namely the Temple of Anubis, Hanamura, Busan, Ayutthaya, Nepal, and sections of Lijiang Tower to a certain extent. I'm starting to see where they maybe got these concepts for, huh? Just from the scaling of objects in the concept art, I'd say maybe that the temple itself is a capture point, where maybe earlier in development there would only be one capture point on a map. The temple looks big enough for a small capture point like the ones that were in the beta. This also opens up the possibility of a really rural map with interesting and open terrain and almost no buildings, something we don't quite have yet. The next map we have is Berlin, Germany. One of the first things you'll probably notice is the Brandenburg Gate, which is one of the most famous monuments in Germany. The only problem with this map that conflicts with the lore today is that Germany was one of the first nations to fight off the Omnic Uprising by themselves. And so this kind of overgrown Berlin wouldn't exist in the lore we have right now, but I still think it's a cool design that can probably still be used if there were a couple of adjustments. One of the important parts of Overwatch is always having a simple way to get to that point, and having giant skyscrapers, if done in Numbani style, could work, just not quite the way that we see them in the picture. This next map is one that we don't actually have a concept art for, and that's because it was one of the first maps, if not the first one, that Blizzard worked on, simply undergoing a change of name. And that is Cairo. Cairo is the map that turned directly into the Temple of Anubis during development, so what you see in Anubis is looking into the past of the development cycle. Now, although this in of itself is really cool, what's even cooler is this fan-made design of what Cairo could have been as a concept for the game. What you're watching is a sped up clip of the creator, Joshua Laurente's, unveiling of his masterpiece. And masterpiece it definitely is. This map is 100% what you'd expect from Blizzard, and to think that it was made by one guy all by himself, making all of the assets himself, is absolutely incredible. Now, this guy still makes Overwatch map concepts in Unreal Engine 4, and all of his designs are absolutely fantastic, each made with incredible detail and care, and I definitely suggest you guys check it out. The link to his channel will be in the description, so go show him some love. Remember the Cairo map though? Well, it turns out that even Daddy Jeff himself said that he'll be in touch with Joshua after seeing the unveiling, so that's really cool. Next, we have a really unique map called Galapagos. The Galapagos Islands are an archipelago quite a bit far off the coast of Ecuador in South America. The map would actually be in an underwater area near the Pacific Islands, something I don't think we've seen yet. I think it could have a similar concept to the way Lunar Colony works, where we could have an underwater section that makes us and projectiles much slower. Personally, I think it deserves a rename, probably somewhere around Eco Point Galapagos. Considering it's underwater and all of that stuff, I doubt there'd be a big city of people living in a giant air bubble underwater, but hey, with the power of Blizzard magic, it could probably get done. This one is actually a control point King of the Hill map, where we'd see 3 versions, though the concept suggests they only had one part lined up. Following up, we have a map only known as India. Another control point, the concept doesn't give us any clue as to where in the massive subcontinent this map would be, but it's also another design based on a temple or shrine from the statue. Curiously though, we can see some heavy technology and sparks flying from the mechanical pieces on the walls. This sort of paints an almost cyberpunk or dystopian view of Overwatch, a lot darker just in theme than the Overwatch we see today. I don't think we've seen a map based in India yet, and I really like the temple themes that are appearing recently since they do have their own little charm to them, and an India map would be a welcome addition. Next, we have the Iron Star. Sounds pretty menacing for a map name, and it also plays onto the darker theme that Overwatch could have had before, as we can clearly see this is a factory for building giant mech-like suits, or maybe even Omnics, who knows. Now, this map is rumored to be a predecessor to Volskaya, namely with the giant mech factory. Interestingly enough, this map would have been a payload, which I find a little hard to see, but you know, I trust Blizzard. Someone definitely had a plan in their head for how this map would play out. Unfortunately, it's hard for me to see this concept finding its way into a modernized version. It's really just too dark, and it would be hard to find a way to make it bright and colorful like Overwatch. On the flip side, we have a map called KYOTO Temple, obviously in Japan. It's quite hard for me to imagine that this concept had absolutely nothing to do with Hanamura just because of the similarities. I mean, it's a temple map in Japan, albeit it's very different than the Hanamura we see today. It's more based on the street section at the very beginning rather than the temple itself from what we see in the concept art. It would also be a King of the Hill map, which was later turned into a 2CP, that is, if this concept had literally anything to do with Hanamura. What we also see is another type of Omnic or maybe vehicle, or whatever mech suit that could have been a design choice for a hero concept. It's possible that maybe D.Va could have had that mech suit and maybe originally been from Japan, but I call that a really big stretch. It's probably just a filler object in the concept art. Next, we have the London concept art. You have about 3 seconds to guess what this concept turned into. If you guessed anything but King's Row, then there's just about no hope for you. Anyway, the map is essentially just the same thing we have today, but it was originally just supposed to be a 2CP instead of the hybrid map that we have right now. I think it's really cool that a design like this managed to make its way to the end of development, but seeing as Tracer was one of the first characters designed, it makes sense that her map would also be one of those to go through the least number of changes, just like her character. Next up, we have Senjokuin in California, US. Now, this map would have been very interesting by concept, I think, but the way that Overwatch went in development, and the fact that there's basically just nothing there, I don't think would have made the greatest map design. Yeah, Blizzard can make maps from just about anything, but this is literally just an open field. The only thing that could see a cool design is that massive looming structure in the background, but even then I smell a name change coming in if that were the case. Other than that, if this map were made into a design, it would likely be based around the houses and the barn. However, most Overwatch maps have a very clear play area and direction to move in, usually tall walls, cliffs that kill you, or just clear sections that say, hey, you can't go this way, accompanied by an invisible wall. In any case, this was a map during pre-development that, for kind of obvious reasons, wasn't put into beta or anything further. Next, we have the Bayou, which would continue the darker Overwatch theme. Now, when I first saw this design of the map, I thought, well, some of these design elements kind of remind me of Junkertown in some ways. Mostly what looks like either a ruined city or just a really, really poorly built one. Interestingly enough, this map is said to have been cut during the development of Overwatch. That is to say, maybe some of the assets were already developed, and all they needed was to put it all together with a level design before scrapping the project altogether. I don't think it's impossible that maybe some of the resources were put to work in Junkertown, like metal textures and stuff like that. Maybe I'm just getting ahead of myself with the speculation, but I don't find it too far off from the realm of possibility. Finally, the last map we have for today is somewhat of a mind-boggler. Now, what we have here is called the Iris, which would have been a control point. Interestingly enough, it was actually cut during development again. Perhaps there were some resources created for it that went on to be used in another design, who knows. The really interesting part is that this is the fabled Iris that religious Omnics keep spouting about. What is the Iris specifically? Is it an artificial intelligence? Is it maybe an omnipotent being? Or is it just a regular Omnic that has tons of influence? Is Zenyatta simply a puppet of the Iris, and is the Iris physical? Well, we don't really know for sure, and we'll have to take a look at that in another video. The map concept itself looks very high-tech, lots of holograms, possibly hard light technology all over the place, and what seems to be one of those sort of AI interfaces you see in movies a lot. Overall, very cool design, and depending on where Blizzard wants to go with the world they've created, we might just see this map pop up in the future with some more story content added to the game, maybe in a future Archives event. Well, that was the last map we had to cover for today. I want you to tell me what is your favorite Lost map and why. Personally, I'm a big fan of the aesthetic of KYOTO Temple because I like the super bright and futuristic look to it. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to drop a like as it really helps me out. If you loved the video and want to see more, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to keep up with every video. This is Quarbit signing off, and as always, have a fantastic day.